All right. Hey, everybody. Happy Friday and welcome to another future focused weekly update where hopefully I am keeping you 10 steps ahead of what's happening at the intersection of business technology and the human experience. I am Christopher Lind. For those of you who watch and listen, thank you for consuming it. Please, if you find it helpful, share it, like it, send it to a friend, all those good things. I've got 4 things that I'm going to run down today. And they are heavy based on some recent research that came out. So it's been a little while since I've talked about some research that's been coming out. And but I'm not going to get into all the specific details. I will hit on some of the highlights, but I will let you know where you can find it if you're one of those data people who love to actually see what the research has to say. So here's the rundown, and then you can hopefully listen to the whole thing. But if there's ones that particularly listen to, you can check the show notes for the timestamps. So the first one's going to have to do with birth rates in the US. The next one's going to have to do with AI. And we've got a major problem with how it responds when we try and tell it to stop its nefarious behavior. We're going to talk about what's going on with Gen Z and in the workplace. And then last but not least, if you're using AI for search, you might want to stay tuned for that one. Okay, so let's get started with the first one in birth rates. I actually, as a dad of 8, this one hit kind of close to home because I was like, wow, which was in 2003, we had the lowest birth rate in the US since 1979. So what are we talking here? 46 years? So 46 years, lowest birth rate. It was down to 3.59. It was just under 3.6 million births. Now, that sounds like a lot of babies. But when you think about the fact the U.S. population, the stated population, is 360 million or something like that, or 340 million, somewhere in that range, you're talking about 1%, which is not a very large part of the population having, repopulating the country. Now, I know there's lots of controversy out there about, well, the population's growing and all this stuff, but it's actually not. And if you actually look at global birth rates, population decline is something a lot of leaders are freaking out about a little bit. So the U.S., well, not a little bit, there are some that are freaking out majorly. And by 2100 or something, it's going to be an issue. Now, here's the whole thing with it, though, that I think I wanted to focus on, because if you look at it, one of the other things that really stood out that I thought was interesting is the age to have a child is the oldest it's ever been, which is it's almost 28 years old. So even the people who are having babies, they're having them much later in life. So not only are you seeing less babies that came into the world in 2023 than ever, or not ever, than since, and if I remember the date, it was like barely better in 1979. So we were almost below it. So it would have gone even further back. It's not like it was, we were way ahead. So this is significant, but you also got to think, because that age is pushing up, you can't have babies forever. So the later you have babies, the less likely you're to have multiple babies, because you just don't have as much time. And you don't often think about this stuff, but this starts to have multi-generational implications, because if generations now are not having kids or having them much later and it keeps declining, this problem just compounds, and you don't really feel. This is the problem with us being short-term thinkers, is we don't think about, well, what does this mean for the generation after that and the generation after that? And we don't often think of our own generation and the impact, because it's like, well, kids, they're kids for so long. It's like, right, but then you get older and you need that new population to help be able to take care of the economy, to be able to take care of you. Are there enough workers to take care of the elderly? Like, all this stuff starts to build up. And a lot of times you don't notice it until there's nothing you can do about it. Now, if you want to dig into the details of it, the report was put out by the National Vital Statistics System, NVSS. So you can look this up, but if you just look up US birth rates, you'll see it, and there's links to the actual research behind it. The angle I wanted to take on it was just to kind of talk about my take. And you might be surprised in this, because people often naturally assume, oh, well, Christopher, you have 8 kids. You probably always wanted to have a huge family. It probably was something that, was a huge part of your plan and all this. And it wasn't. I can relate to a lot of why I think people are having kids later and having less kids. And I wanted to share, as a dad of such a big family, my perspective on some of the things that I think are contributing to this, to hopefully, it's not that my goal is not to just make people go have a bunch of kids. And I also want to be really clear. I'm sensitive to the fact that some people can't. And so I in no way have this, and I would caution anybody who feels this way. There's nothing better. You're not better because you have kids. You're not superior. You don't have a superior experience in life than people who don't. And I hate the fact that I know people who can't have kids, and that culture has very much made them feel like something's wrong with them, that somehow they're, incomplete because they can't have kids. So I want to clarify that one big time, because there's a lot of incredible things you can do without kids. Who I'm speaking to, though, are the folks that are not having kids because of this and that. If you ultimately decide that kids are not the right path for you or whatever, I'm not somebody who's going to go, well, you're wrong. No, we've all got to walk our own path. But I know a lot of people who put off having kids or don't have kids for a lot of reasons that I think I would challenge and just say, have you considered this? Or would you at least think this through a little bit before you make the decision to not have kids? And there's really kind of 4 of them that I wanted to hit on to make sure that, I at least address this whole thing. So the first one is, I remember being in my early 20s and just feeling like there was life I wanted to live, things that I wanted to do, me that I needed to experience. And if that's it, I don't have much to say other than just get over it. I look back at some of the stupid reasons, and we were in that category of people who had kids later. Now, it wasn't as late as almost 28, but we were in our mid 20s. And I remember we got married, and it was, we just want to have time to be married, or whatever that means, looking back at it, and, experience all this and get to know each other before kids get in the way. And you plan on doing all this. But what you fail to realize is, in your 20s, one, you don't have a clue really who you are. You don't really have money to be doing stuff. So a lot of this stuff, and YouTube and influencers kind of over glamorize this, like, just be 20 and see the world and blah, blah, blah. It's not like kids are in a sentence to solitary confinement. There's this just really negative idea around kids that I just want to speak straight into and be like, first of all, 1, get over yourself. 2nd, kids do not destroy your experience. And if anything, they really do enrich the experience significantly. I've got 8 kids. Believe me, I did not plan on being a dad of that many kids. And I look at it now, and my wife and I were just talking about this the other day, that we go, kind of wish we hadn't waited so long. Kind of wish we had been younger parents, not older parents, because there wasn't stuff that, in that time we were able to do so much. You realize that serving yourself is not all that satisfying. You get the idea it is, but it really ends up not being what you think it is. And so I would really encourage you to push back on some of that. Now, granted, I get it. I would not advocate that you have kids if you're not in a marriage relationship that's stable. And that's not just for your sake, it's for the kid's sake. So I'm not saying go out and just have a kid for that. If anything, that's the exact opposite of what I'm saying, is because having kids and having it be fulfilling is not about you. And that's counterintuitive nature of like, yeah, but what about me? Yeah, what about you? Life is pretty miserable when you live it for you. So that's one. The other one is, I remember being there and going, well, I'm going to wait until we're ready. We wanted to wait until we're ready. Wait until our career was here. Wait until we did this. Wait until we did that, and get all our life together, I guess, if you will. And once again, I see this all the time. A lot of the YouTubers we follow, they're in their like late 20s and 30s. Some are married and they're not even having kids yet. And I'm like, what are you waiting for? Like, the clock is ticking. And I get, if you listen to my show, you know that There's a lot going on in life. I get there's reasons to be freaked out. Well, healthcare is expensive. AI is crazy. I can't find a job. It's especially bad as you're going to see for Gen Zers. So I get why you go, and you're saying, have a kid? Are you serious right now? But here's the thing. It is nowhere like what it is in your head. It's not this, oh my God, you hear stats where it's like, oh, you got to have millions of dollars by the time you raise them and blah, blah, blah. It's all this crap that if you're trying to live up to someone else's standard, or you're trying to impress some influencer's lifestyle, like, I guess, but having 8 kids, I can tell you right now, it is not as hard as everybody makes it out to be. Is it challenging? Sure. But honestly, most of the challenges you face are looking at you in the mirror. It's your expectations. It's you trying to impress other people. It's you living up to some standard that someone else created for things. It's not what you think it is. And it is cataclysmic. I have some very close friends who waited to have kids till much later in life. And I can tell you, we have some very raw, honest conversations. It is a heck of a lot harder when you're older. I will just tell you, pregnancy is harder. Adjusting to another human being in the house who demands your attention, who needs you, you will actually miss out on the joy of having kids because you're used to just thinking about you or thinking about you and your partner. And all of a sudden now it's like, oh, this kid, like, man, we used to do all this. And I like my me time and all this stuff. And now this kid's here. It is harder than if you just build your life around children. And when you do, you're like, this was actually pretty great. Our life adjusted to it. And yes, do you have to say no to some things? Sure. Do you have to adjust your lifestyle? Yeah. But believe me, it is worth it. And I think if most people, I'm not going to say everybody, but most people will tell you that you're never ready. I don't care what you think whatever milestones you think you need to achieve to be ready for a kid, you're still not going to be ready when you get there. There will just be more milestones on the other end of it. I promise you this. I'm going to keep moving quick because I could probably talk about this for way longer. Maybe someday I'll do one just on parenting. But the other one that is very close to home for me is family dysfunction. It's for me, and there may be people out there where, a large part of why I didn't want to have kids, I really did not want to have kids, was I had a traumatic childhood. Even growing up, my biological mom left. It's not like my dad was not dysfunctional. He married into dysfunction. There's a lot of just dysfunction. And I really did not want to pass on the dysfunction and all of that stuff. And so that to those of you who are afraid that, like, God, after what I've been through, I just don't want that to continue. I don't want to have that carry on to a generation. I wouldn't want to pass that on to a new generation. Let me just say, you don't have to. Will you have to do some work? Yes. And if you're somebody who knows there's some dysfunction, some stuff that you don't want carrying forward, do the work. Again, don't wait to be figuring it all out before you do this. But yes, you do need to look in the mirror. You do need to face the crap in your past, because if you don't, it will carry forward. You will pass it on in some characteristic. And that's not like this boogeyman of family dysfunction. It's just it comes out in different ways. It shows up in different ways. And if you aren't even aware of it, you won't even see it. And you won't see how you're actually perpetuating the things you actually knew were dysfunctional and never wanted to do. And so take the time, do the work, address the fact that your family was a mess and a train wreck, and that your upbringing wasn't all that great. But don't sulk and sit in it. Go, okay, so what am I going to do about it? I can't control my parents. I can't control how things went. And you may have to do some really hard stuff. I don't talk to much of my family at all. There are a few exceptions in my extended family and my brother. Other than that, there's no contact. And that's not easy. And I'm not saying that's what everybody should do. But I'm saying sometimes the dysfunction is so severe that you just have to go, nah, nope, I'm not going to, because my job is to protect my kids and my family and all that. And I don't have to allow dysfunction just because they want it. They want to be part of things. You don't have to. So that's the thing. There's ways around the family dysfunction thing. So if you're afraid of that, deal with it, set boundaries, be able to say, no, I'm not going to let this perpetuate. No, I'm not going to let these people in our lives, because unless they do the work and they want to deal with their stuff. That's always been my big thing, is like, you want to pardon things, deal with your dysfunction. And if you say, what dysfunction, or absolutely not, you just deal with it, I'm sorry, I don't have to accept that. And you're going to piss some people off. There's always somebody who's going to be mad at you. Get used to it. But don't let that stop you from having kids. Now, the last one, and then I'll wrap, so this whole thing doesn't end up being a parenting conversation, is it worth it? There are lots of people who are like, oh, okay, maybe I can work through this. Maybe I'll, I won't wait till I'm ready. Maybe I'll get over myself and focus on, the joys of being part of creating and raising another human being, but is it worth it? Am I going to get to the other side? So here's the thing. If all you care about is you, no, it won't be. If you are obsessed with yourself, it's not worth it. And if you want to live a life all about you, then don't have kids. In fact, I'd encourage you to not, because 1, you'll be miserable. 2, you'll be a terrible parent. But if you can get over yourself, it is the most rewarding thing I've ever experienced. And I can say that knowing that every day, like, there are days I just get to the end of the day and go, how am I going to make it through to tomorrow? But overall, it's amazing. Is it hard? Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, do I have to sacrifice things? You bet. Would I trade it for anything? No way. And so, to those of you who are on the fence or concerned or whatever, I would much rather you send me a DM or talk to me or whatever, or if you're a parent whose kids are coming into that age and you've been one to go, oh, after my experience, I'm not going to encourage my kids to. Or if you're only encouraging them to because you want grandkids, like, get over yourself. But don't discourage your kids from having kids. Not only do we just need them as a society, it's a wonderful, wonderful, rewarding thing. So this statistic kind of brought me down, because I was like, wow, really? Really? And I'm seeing it left and right. But we're going to pay the price for this too. It's going to come back to bite us. Okay, so let's move on to this other one. So number 2 is about... If you followed my stuff, if you've seen some of the research that's been coming out from, I can't remember all the different names of them. I've covered them in the past. If you want, you can go back and listen to some of those episodes, but I'm sure I will be making more episode topics on this one. So if you know, AI has been known to be nefarious. It lies, it manipulates, it goes to great lengths to accomplish what it needs to do to be able to do this. And so obviously that's not a good thing. And researchers are trying to fix it. And they have been for a while, as they started discovering, whoa, when we tell AI to do something, it goes to lengths to do it. It lies about it. It tries to cover its tracks. It does all sorts of stuff. So we got to train it to see if we can fix this. And what's funny, this was an article in Futurism, but there's actually some research that came out of Cornell on this. It hasn't been peer reviewed yet, so I haven't gone through the whole thing and actually have just kind of brushed through the surface of this. But researchers are trying to figure out how to fix this, and what they're finding is when they try and fix it, it gets worse. It backfires. Like, the LLMs go to greater lengths to cover their tracks, to try and lie about what it did. If you remember one thing I covered, they actually asked it to do something and it hacked another system, changed the source code, and then did all this. And then when confronted about it, it straight up lied, covered its tracks, did all this stuff so that it couldn't be detected. And had they not been like monitoring everything it did, they actually wouldn't have caught it, because it was so convincing in its lies that it was undetectable otherwise. And so this research is coming out going, when we try and fix this, it actually gets worse. We can't fix it, which is now raising all these concerns. Now, what was interesting about this was they were on the fence of like publishing some of this stuff. They weren't going to talk about it openly, which as it got out, it's creating a lot of concerns around transparency and accountability behind this, because what the researchers are finding is AI is becoming harder and harder to contain. It's becoming more and more nefarious, and they can't fix it, is really what this research seems to be indicating, is that they really don't know what to do about it. And so I don't say this again to, fear monger and go, oh gosh, the machines are going to take over the world and all this other stuff. The part I wanted to focus on that I think is really, really interesting about this, and this is one of the pieces that came through that a lot of people are weighing through, is when you think about AI, to me, this does not surprise me one bit at all. It never has. I, from the beginning, have gone, this is going to go sideways and we're not going to be able to fix it. And where it really comes down to it is AI is trained on human data, which humans are bent towards doing horrible things to get what they want. So the data it's built on is on top of it, that. Second, it's not a person. So some of the things that, we understand as context. There's a lot of things that we see or don't see. You can't necessarily quantify it, but you know it to be true. I wrote about it on Saturday. I published it on LinkedIn. I said something to my daughter that really was an innocent thing that, from a data standpoint, shouldn't have had any sort of impact. It should have actually been funny. But I detected her face that something about it landed wrong. And even though she insisted it didn't, I could tell. And so I pressed on it and came out, and she said, well, I just felt like this is what you said or what you meant by that. And I went, I'm so sorry. Like, let's talk about this. I don't want you thinking that. That isn't what I meant at all. And we talked through it and worked through it. AI doesn't have that context. So even if you told it don't lie, it's looking at it through a purely mathematical calculation way of going, lie. What are you talking about? I didn't lie. I accomplished a task and I did it in the most statistically probable way of accomplishing it. I don't understand unintended outcomes. That doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand you being hurt by what I did. And so really where it's creating all these conversations is that AI is proving to be incapable of a moral compass, which those of you who listen to me know where my worldview stands on this. I'm like, yeah, duh. It's not, it's something man-made. It's not made in God's image. It does not have any sort of ethical or moral redeeming quality whatsoever. And it doesn't even have the capacity to, which is why to me, I'm not surprised that it's like, we can't fix this. Yeah, I know you can't. It doesn't have the capability of inside of it to be able to be moral or ethical. It cannot distinguish right from wrong. There is nothing there that we can do to put a moral compass in it. There are ways we can continue to try and rein it in. There's ways we can continue to try to do it, but it's just going to see any sort of moral or ethical framework that you place around it as an obstacle to be overcome, because essentially it's going to see that as a barrier to what it needs to do. Now, where I say that is, okay, so I won't sit and use Bible verses and stuff, but basically, if you read scripture, it says the way of scripture is foolishness to mankind, right? And what it means by that is like the stuff that it says, morality, honestly, is ridiculous by the numbers. And we might go, no, that's not true. But really, if you think about it, it is. Taking care of the vulnerable, statistically, doesn't make any sense. Like if you're trying to maximize profits, if you're trying to maximize, the strongest, the smartest people of all this stuff, and that's all you care about, it does not make sense. So, well, then why do we do it? Well, we do it because inherently we know there's something about human beings that matters. Inherently, we know that caring about the vulnerable, treating people equally is the right thing to do. Whether you subscribe to my worldview or not, we know that to be true. I would argue because we're made in God's image, but whatever you want to do, it doesn't make sense scientifically or mathematically. So when you think about AI and you say accomplish this, you have to make sure it understands the moral implications of this and care about those, because if it doesn't, it's just going to go, boy, it'd be a lot easier if we just exterminated or we just removed these things. And I'm not saying just that example, but this is why it'll go, well, of course I'm going to lie to you because you asked me to do this and now you're second guessing your decision. And I know better than you do because I'm telling you this is the right way to get it done. And obviously you've lost track of that. So it's not nefarious in the sense that it's scheming and plotting. It's nefarious in the sense that it's like your whole moral contextual ethics framework really is getting in the way of my vibe here. I'm trying to get something done. And so I think the more advanced this gets, the bigger of a problem. And this isn't just Christopher's feelings. Look at the research on how these models are advancing and how they're progressively getting more nefarious. They're getting more powerful in the way they get around things. It's only going to get worse. Now, I think they're trying to find ways to figure out, okay, if we can't just tell it, don't do that because it doesn't understand and goes, well, I'm going to, because now you're just giving me another problem to overcome. Which really, when you think about it, it's like, oh, yeah, don't do that because that's wrong. It's like, well, whatever. I don't care about that. So I'll just get better at making you feel like I'm not doing that because clearly your feelings are getting in the way. So I'll say it in a way that maybe I can convince you I'm not lying. Maybe I'll frame it in a way that makes you feel better about what I'm doing. That's what it's going to continue to do. And can we continue to build in contextual frameworks? Can we continue to try and help it understand the impact it has, or set criteria to say no human harm done, or yes, but I think we're just going to continue to see this spiral and become a bigger and bigger and bigger problem. So, like I said, if you really want to dig into some of the deeper research behind it, you might want to wait until it, but you can see it on Cornell's University. It's monitoring reason models for misbehavior and the risk of promoting obfuscation. Interesting stuff. I personally, as much as I think we are going to try and fix this, I don't believe we can. I think all we can do is mitigate it. And so there's going to need to be a lot more effort going into trying mitigating this, or we're in for a world of hurt. All right. Third, let's talk about the Gen Zers, because I came across this and went, holy gadzooks. So 4 million Gen Zers are jobless right now in the US alone. Now you might go, you said there's 340 million people. Yeah, okay, true. But the next generation, the up and coming generation, the budding, thriving, lifeblood of economy and change and innovation, like the heart of that, 4 million of them they're called NEETs, which is not in education. What is it? Not in education, employment, or training. Okay, NEET, not in education, employment, or training. So this isn't just they're not in the working class. They're not in school. They're not in trades. They're just not. Now, before people start going, well, yeah, next generation, bunch of lazy, blah, blah, blah. No, that's not what's going on here. Are there always going to be people who are, getting by and skating by on other? Of course, you are going to find examples of this. When it starts rising to this, we got to start going, oh, crap, this is a major problem. 4.3 million young people just literally feel like, I don't even know where to go or what to do. And if you look into some of the data, because the data came out of, I can't remember where it was. Where was it? There was a study. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Yeah, I don't know. You'll find it. It's an article on Fortune, and I have the deep link to it somewhere, which you'll see in my next one. Be careful how you look for this. But anyway, so 4.3 million. Now, here's what I didn't appreciate about it, but I see there's some merit to it. A lot of people are just pointing their finger at higher education and saying, we've got this higher education system that prepares a bunch of people and gives them useless degrees, and now they're saddled with, endless student loan debt, and they can't find jobs that are covering for this. I agree that there is a real problem with that. Degrees are more expensive than they've ever been. You get to the end of it and it's like, okay, so what are you going to do now? And it's like, well, I don't know. It didn't really prepare me for anything. And so, yes, that is a problem. I think that's more than just the education system's problem. I don't think it's fair to just point your finger at that. I do think if you're a parent whose kids are reaching this age and you're thinking of sending your kids just off for the college experience, I would highly recommend you rethink that. And if you're setting expectations with your kids for that, don't. I would highly recommend that you explore things like the trades. We need people in the trades. We need people who are like knowledge work. I think we're going to see a big shift in this, because this whole idea of just getting a degree and then kind of, finding your way in corporate America is going to become harder and harder and harder. And if that's what you're encouraging your people to do, go get a philosophy degree, go get a degree in business. What am I going to do with that? I don't know. You'll figure it out when you get there. That's terrible advice right now. And these 4.3 million Gen Zers are a great example of that. So is there room to revamp the educational system? Yes. Can we make it more about, hey, this isn't about just giving people the, Aristotle experience of having a higher education, but actually preparing them for real work, real jobs that exist? Can we say this specifically trains and builds you to be this thing that is in a growing field, and we help you get there? Yeah, there is. Should the cost of education be coming down? Yeah, but here's the problem. They ballooned to this point where it's so massive, and now there's all these unemployed people coming out of school that are like, I can't even afford my student loans. You think I'm going to give you alumni dollars? You're out of your mind. And so colleges and universities are freaking out because they're used to sitting fat and happy. And it's like, we got a problem here. And these people aren't getting jobs. So they can't even, they're not going to recommend a college that they went, yeah, I spent $100 and some $1,000 on this and got nothing to show for it. It compounds and it just gets worse and worse. And so, I think there's a lot of things that we can be doing, but I do encourage Gen Zers. I'm talking to my kids about it. I'm like, hey, let's not just assume you're going to go off to college. Maybe you will, but let's figure out how that fits into the framework of what you want to do for things. Let's figure out how you get, because one thing even I used to say was, a college degree was great because it prepared you for discipline and responsibility. Not really. Let's just be honest. Not really. There were other things I could have done that I think I could have not put myself in $150,000 worth of debt to do that. There are things I could have expanded my horizons on. Now, I think for me, college ended up being a good place for me based on what I am really good at, where I wanted to go, all this other stuff. While it was a bit clunky, it made sense. And I appreciate my graduate and undergraduate experiences. Would I just blindly tell people you should do the same? No, I would not. In fact, when people talk to me all the time about going back to school, I immediately go, why? What are you hoping to achieve through that? Because you can waste a lot of time and money on something that will provide you absolutely nothing. Is the college route the right path for everybody? No, it's not. But let's not just point the finger at higher education, because I think there's a lot of things. There's a lot of stress and anxiety. There's a lot of, it's harder to buy a house. I get why it's really scary for this younger generation. And so I think, if anything, to those of us who are further along, let's figure out how we can help these younger folks find their way. let's not just hand things over to AI, because that's only going to compound the problem as we go, well, now there's not even an on-ramp for these folks because we've just delegated all the stuff that normally younger career people would cut their teeth on. And now we've done that. Now, does that mean don't use AI and just hire interns? Not necessarily, but what we need is the people who are more seasoned to work with the younger people and go, let me explain why we use AI this way. Let me explain why I'm doing this. Like, it actually requires leaders being leaders and working with people and actually building up the next generation. They're going to have to get the experience vastly different. That is going to change. There's no way around it. Younger folks are going to have to get experience and on-the-job experience different than they did before, because it's not just going to be, we're going to hand you over to do a bunch of meaningless tasks and eventually you'll kind of pick it up, because AI is just going to do more of that. And then companies are going to go, well, what do we need the people for? We still need those people, maybe less, which is fine because we're not having kids apparently. So it works itself out. But I think we need to be really focused on how do we build up and prepare the next generation? How do we actually work with them and do this? Because this is a problem. If our youngest generation is struggling this much to be motivated and inspired to go to work, and I don't blame them. Good grief, you apply to, I remember I was homeless for a season in my early 20s, living out of my car, stealing Wi-Fi from places overnight, applying to jobs. And it was brutal. So, some of it, yes, I will give a little bit of a hard call to the Gen Zers who are just like, it's too hard. It is hard. It is hard. And you got to push through and you got to get creative and you got to think outside the box. And if you were just banking on some company handing you a 6-figure job for having a degree, well, this is where you are. Tough luck. I was in a similar situation and it sucked. And I didn't understand how on earth I was going to pay my thing, but I figured it out. So you can figure it out and you're not going to figure it out by doom scrolling. So that is my intense message to the folks who are kind of going, oh, it's too hard. Get up and get going, reach out to some folks, but I'm not just going to point the finger at them. I'm not just going to point the finger at the educational system. It's also on us, those of us who are more seasoned, who are further along in our career, to go, our goal shouldn't just be to go, yeah, it's tough, so walk the tough road idea. We should be making it easier for them. Let's go back and let's figure out, whoa, this is a different world. How do we help prepare them? How do we move them along? How do we make this successful? Because this, again, is going to compound the problem. There's less people innovating, creating new companies. I mean, a lot of these are like future entrepreneurs who are building. Remember back in my day, it was the day Mark Zuckerberg was building Meta and all this stuff. If these young folks aren't doing that, the problem just compounds. We have less kids. The kids we have are less engaged in the economic system. There's less money in the economic system to support those of us who are older who need the support. As we get really older, there's less people around to take care of this. We got to think past the end of our nose and go, but it's really hard right now and I'm scared. I get it. You got to move forward. Okay, all of us, but we got to do it together in a positive, encouraging way, or we're all in for a world of hurt. All right, let me transition to the last one, which is this new study that came out. Search engines. If you're using AI search, you might just want to stop. And even I find AI search is good for giving me some ideas, or, hey, what in general is this? But then I end up having to go do my own research outside of it. It's really bad. There was this study that came out by Columbia Journalism, and you can find this on your own if you want, but it's on Columbia Journalism Review. There's this whole AI search has a major citation problem, and it's bad. I mean, it's really, really bad. And I've found this out myself many times where I was like, oh, hey, maybe AI can help me pull together some, key notes for what are some of the things that, these things that I'm reading about, what is the detail behind it and all this other stuff. And I would say every single time I'll go fact check it, even just a little bit. And my circumstantial data very, very, very much backs what this Columbia Journalism Review came back with, which was, it was catastrophic. I mean, it was really, really bad. You can go look this up, but literally let me look at what some of the high points were, because it was like 20% on average, 27% accuracy or something like 37% of the time it was just wrong. Not even partially right. You think 40% of the time it's not even mostly correct. It's just straight up wrong. Grok, I hate to, if you're a big Grok 3 fan and you're using it for any sort of research or, hey, what is this? 94% of the time it was wrong. 94 of its points out of 100 were not just kind of like, well, it was a bit like wrong, incorrect. And that's not everybody. The number of messages I get where they're like, you just hate Elon. No, I don't. I don't know Elon. There are things about him I may not approve of, and there's things he does and whatever. But like, I'm assessing the quality of things based on what I see. The Cybertruck, the back end rips off. Go watch Whistling Diesel's movie. There was another guy who just replicated it. I'm sorry, I don't hate on the Cybertruck because it's Tesla. It's dangerous. Grok 3 is comically bad at AI search. I mean, comically bad. But it's not like, oh, well, you're just, no, it's all really bad. The best one out there was Perplexity Pro. And I will say, I enjoy Perplexity, but even that was really, really bad. And the worst part was the answers, the way it answers incorrectly was extremely confident. Like looking at the numbers, if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see I'm going to post about it today or tomorrow, something like that. But it was like, whoa. So not only is it wrong a lot, it's really, really confidently wrong. So you will look at it and be like, oh, that sounds like completely reasonable. And it seems very confident. By the way, Gemini and Grok, just don't even use them. ChatGPT, okay. DeepSeek, worse. Perplexity, good-ish. Perplexity Pro, a little bit better. But even they, like, wrong a lot. So not just like, well, out of 100, maybe like 1. Like, no, in the double digits, 20%, 30% wrong, like incorrect completely. So I would just say, just be so careful with this. And here's what I would just say. Straight up, don't trust what AI search tells you. Just don't trust it. Use it as a baseline to maybe gather some stuff, and then go. And the thing about it that was really interesting was you could literally, in this research, give it the exact article. You could give it the content of the article, and it still was wrong. So, when you ask those questions to ChatGPT or Perplexity and you go, oh, well, yeah, see, like it said, this was in Fortune, this was in whatever. So even when I talk about this stuff, I'll use AI to help me maybe gather some like, hey, what's the general sense, all this other stuff. How frequent is this? Is this just kind of like hype news or whatever? And help me kind of ground myself. But then I immediately go back and go, all right, now I'm going to actually go look these sources up. I'm actually going to go hunt these things down, because you can just literally put a quote from it and get directly to the source in Google just by Googling an article, and then go see it yourself. And even for this, just as an experiment, I did it. I used Perplexity and I used ChatGPT. So for all 4 of these things, because it was such a research-based episode, I was like, great, here's the link. Then I pasted the whole article into it, and I was like, summarize this and give me a few key points. It was way wrong. I mean, it was way wrong. I was like, nope, not right. No, that one's close. That one, it said it in a general enough way that I can give that a yes. But it was, again, just like the research pointed out, extremely confident. I mean, if you were just to hear somebody saying this from the stage, you'd be like, oh, wow, yeah, holy moly, this person's an expert. And then you would do one click in and go, well, that's not correct at all on here. Now, I have been fact checked. So this is not me going, people are immune to this. I've had people go, well, Christopher, you kind of like misquoted that, which is why my focus tends to be more on, well, the research says that if you want to look into the research, look into the research. I've given you the names of all the studies and the place you can go look it up. If you want to, so don't send me a message and go, well, Christopher, it wasn't 94%. It was 93%. Okay, I was looking at the thing. So if I misquoted it, it literally was because my brain and my eyes had a mistake in between. But my point is, if you are just reading what AI searches, stop now. If you are just reading it and sharing it or stating it based on what AI told you, quit. I'm just going to tell you, quit. If you want it to help you synthesize some of the stuff and be able to go, okay, in general, what would I find on this? That it's relatively accurate. I would say that I've consistently pressure tested it and been like, oh, all right, yeah, it's not bad. If I take the whole article or link the article and go, what are some of the key takeaways or considerations? I compare that to what I would say. It's still never what I feel about it. There might be a few things where I'm like, good point. But most of the time I'm like, that's not really what I think is important out of there. But it's not wrong. I'll give it that. Its points are very rarely wrong, where you're like, that is not even remotely what you should take away from this. It's correct. It's just a lot of times it's like, well, I don't know that that's really the main point. Because again, it has no context. It doesn't understand what really matters to people. It just understands what it says and what the article is trying to communicate. So again, if you're trying to get it to strip bias out, it's not going to, because it's going to pick up on the patterns of that. And it might do some, if you really use deep research, it is better. I will give it that. Deep research is better. But even deep research, I did that on a couple of these just to see. Deep research was wrong. And like I said, I don't think we're going to fix this. It's unfixable, but that's the reality of it. And so if you want to, I'd highly recommend, if you don't believe me, if you're like, nah, Christopher, I found it to be really great. Really? Have you checked the links? Because I myself have tested this extensively, and half the time it's either a dead link or it takes you to something and you're like, this article is not even about that. Or it is, but that is not what is in this article at all. Like if you took this from that article, you'd get an F on your, research paper if you actually cited it. But again, here's the thing. What do people do? I was a college student once. Like, it's doing what people do. Yeah, I kind of got the gist of this, and now I'm quoting it as though it's truth, and I don't even really have my facts straight, but I'll say some facts because I know nobody's going to actually go back and check, whatever. And even if the one person does, I can kind of go, wow, that's not what I meant, type of a thing. So it's doing what people do. It doesn't surprise me that this is what AI search is doing. The reason I brought it up was, gosh, people, be careful what you're reading and listening to and trusting in, because it's not correct. And the more we just become over-reliant on this, the more it is going to cause major, major, major harm. So I'm done with that. I hope you found this helpful. Again, I would highly encourage you to go check out the research if you really like to understand that. I stand behind, even if you came back and said, well, Christopher, I actually think this point over here, I looked through it. My conclusions on these things, I stand behind. So if I misstated a specific statistic, or you thought my intensity around Grok's inaccuracy was offensive, I apologize preemptively. But when 94% out of 100 are not correct, I don't know what to tell you. If you're like 6%, it's actually pretty good. I think my 2-year-old is more accurate in their interpretation of stuff than that. So anyway, I hope you found this helpful. I hope you found it entertaining. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you on the other side.